Four spheres of knowledge creation. The social dynamics. How ideas get made, blocked, and set free. By René Boetker. An adaptation based on the four spheres of knowledge creation, the causal principles, by René Boetker. Introduction. The four people in every room. Why every important idea runs the same gauntlet. Think about the last time you had a genuinely new idea at work. Not a variation on something existing, something actually new. A different way of seeing the problem. A direction nobody had suggested yet. You know what happened next. Someone laughed it off. Someone else fought it. And eventually, if you're lucky, it became something that everyone treated as obvious and quietly forgot that they'd ever opposed. This sequence is so common it's become a cliché. There's even a quote about it. First they ridicule you, then they fight you, then it is accepted as self-evident. Most people read this as a story about courage, but it's actually something more precise and more useful. It's a description of how knowledge moves through a room, or fails to. The ridicule isn't random. The fight isn't personal. The eventual acceptance isn't a change of heart. Each response is the perfectly logical output of a different way of knowing, a different answer to the question that sits, usually unspoken, under every knowledge conversation. What counts as real? What counts as true? What counts as worth acting on? There are four answers to this question. Four distinct ways that human beings create, test, carry, and prove knowledge. Four spheres of knowledge creation, and together they explain, with surprising precision, why certain ideas travel and certain ideas die. The four archetypes. The four spheres have four faces. They show up in every meeting and every conversation where something new is trying to get born. The artist knows something before they can prove it. They work from instinct and pattern, a felt sense that something is true, sometimes built up over years of deep engagement with a domain. They cannot always explain themselves. They just know. The skeptic only trusts what they've personally seen. They have built their knowledge through real experience, real failures, real encounters with how things actually work. When something new arrives, they test it against that archive. If it doesn't fit, they're not impressed by how good it sounds. The politician understands that knowledge doesn't spread on its own. Ideas need carriers. They need to be wrapped in the right story, connected to the right people, timed to the right moment. The politician does that work. They are the distribution system. The analyst believes that truth emerges from structured conflict. Put two opposing claims in a room under agreed rules of evidence, and what survives the collision is something closer to real. The analyst designs that test. The sequence in the opening quote is not random. The ridicule comes from the skeptic, whose archive doesn't yet have a category for the new thing. The fight comes from the politician, who manages existing consensus and sees the new idea as a threat. The acceptance as self-evident happens through the analyst, when the evidence becomes undeniable. How this book works. Each chapter takes one sphere and opens it up from the inside, not as a personality type, but as a distinct knowledge structure, with its own way of seeing objects, its own way of moving information, its own world, and its own rules for what counts as true. Those four taxonomies, objects, interactions, sets, and fields, are the machinery that makes each sphere tick. You don't need to know the theory. The chapters will show you. Then we'll look at why knowledge gets stuck in the gaps between the spheres. And finally, the most important part, we'll look at what becomes possible when you stop thinking of the four spheres as fixed types and start thinking of them as dimensions you can deliberately mix. Because the spheres are archetypes, not cages. And once you understand what each one is actually made of, you can build something better. Chapter 1. The Artist. Knowing before you can explain. There is a moment that every experienced professional knows. You walk into a meeting or read a proposal, or listen to a pitch, and something feels wrong. Not wrong in a way you can point to yet, just wrong. A hum beneath the surface, a sense that the numbers are too clean, the logic too neat, the story missing something important. You can't explain it in the meeting. So you say nothing, or you say something vague, and people move on. And then, 3 months later, the thing goes wrong in exactly the way you felt it would. That feeling is not a feeling. It is knowledge. It's just knowledge in a form that most organizations have never learned to use. What the artist knows. Schopenhauer, a 19th century philosopher who spent most of his career furious that people didn't listen to him, had a word for this. He called it the Verstand, the understanding, the part of the mind that grasps causality directly, without needing to reason through it step by step. You don't calculate that something is wrong, you read it, the way a chess grandmaster reads the board and sees the threat in 2 moves before they've consciously worked through the logic. The way a great leader walks into a room and knows the meeting has already been had without them. The way a painter puts down the brush and walks away, not from defeat, but from a knowledge that one more stroke would be one too many. As Oppenheimer said, "Genius sees the answer before the question." This is artistic knowledge. It is direct, immediate, and pre-verbal. It exists before language has caught up. The object the artist knows. The artist knows things from the inside out. In the framework of this book, the objects of knowledge in the artistic sphere are positively defined, which means they exist independently of any particular context. The artist understands what something is in itself, not just what it happens to be in this organization, in this market, at this moment. That's why their knowledge is portable. They can walk into a new situation and read it, because what they've developed is an understanding of underlying principles, not just familiarity with a specific set of circumstances. This is sometimes called modular knowledge. You can pick it up and move it. It's not welded to the context it was built in. How the artist interacts. The artist's knowledge moves through expression, not explanation, expression. There's a difference. Explanation works step by step, from premises to conclusions. Expression puts something in front of you and lets you encounter it directly. The artist who says, "This design is wrong," and then shows you another design that is right, and you see immediately, without being told why, is expressing knowledge. The architect who sketches something in 30 seconds that an entire committee couldn't arrive at in 2 hours is expressing knowledge. The experienced manager who restructures a team in a way that feels obvious in retrospect, but that nobody else saw coming, is expressing knowledge. Because this knowledge travels through expression rather than explanation, it's called tacit, not secret, pre-linguistic. It can't be fully captured in a report or a training manual. It can only be transferred by working alongside someone, watching them operate, being in the room when they make a call. The artist's world. The artistic sphere operates in what you might call an open world. The artist's knowledge isn't constrained by what has already been done or what the existing structure allows. They're working from a set of all possibilities, an infinite universe of potential interactions. Not what has been actualized, but what could be. This is abstract knowledge in the best sense of the word. Not disconnected from reality, grounded in deep experience, but not trapped by the particular. The artist can see beyond what currently exists, which is both their gift and their problem. The artist's rules. The artistic sphere validates knowledge internally. The artist doesn't check their sense of things against an external rule book. They check it against their own deep understanding, the accumulated years of pattern recognition that have become, over time, a kind of compass. This makes their creative capacity immense. The artist is explorative by nature. They range freely, form genuinely new combinations, produce knowledge that didn't exist before they arrived. Their creative output is innate rather than acquired. It arises from what they fundamentally are, not from what they've been taught. It is radical, capable of producing categorically new knowledge, not just refinements of the existing. And it is disruptive, because it enters established systems as something those systems have no category for yet. But here's the catch. Internal validation, by definition, is not externally verifiable. The artist who is wrong can be just as confident as the artist who is right. And nobody, including the artists themselves, can easily tell the difference until the idea meets reality. This is why the artist needs the other spheres, not to be tamed, to be completed. The artistic sphere, in plain terms. What they know. The nature of things from the inside out, not context-dependent, portable. How they share it. Through expression and demonstration, not argument, tacit, pre-verbal. What world they work in. Open, infinite possibilities, not trapped by what already exists. What counts as true. Internal resonance, their own deep compass. Absorbs knowledge, objectively, immediately, openly, from any direction. Creates knowledge, exploratively, innately, radically, genuinely new things. The artist's knowledge is the beginning, but beginnings that stay beginnings change nothing. The next sphere is what stands between the artist's insight and its actualization. Chapter 2. The Skeptic. The weight of real experience. Every organization has that person. You present the new idea. Everyone else is nodding, excited, already thinking about implementation. And then that person speaks. We tried something like this in 2015. It didn't work. Here's why. The room deflates. The momentum dies. You want to be frustrated, but the thing is, they're usually right. Not always, but usually. They remember something everyone else has forgotten, or never knew. This person is not obstructing you, they are protecting you. The problem is that protecting and obstructing look identical from the outside, and they themselves often can't tell you which they're doing. That is the skeptic, and understanding them changes everything. What the skeptic knows. The skeptic knows what has actually happened. Not what should happen, not what the theory predicts, not what the model suggests. What happened in this specific environment, with these specific people, under these specific constraints. Hegel, the philosopher who went head-to-head with Schopenhauer at the University of Berlin, described the skeptic's knowledge as a kind of negative image. The skeptic knows an object not by what it is in itself, but by what it has done, what it has touched, what it has bounced off of in their personal experience. The object exists in their mind as a shape defined by everything around it. This is rich, dense, contextual knowledge, and it's irreplaceable. The object the skeptic knows. Where the artist's knowledge objects are positively defined, portable and independent, the skeptics are architecturally defined as a negative. Their knowledge is built into the structure of their experience. It's not separable from the context in which it was acquired. The skeptic who knows that a particular supplier always overpromises on timeline doesn't know this as an abstract principle. They know it because of what happened with that supplier on a specific project in 2019. This kind of knowledge doesn't transfer easily. It's not modular. You can't pick it up and move it. When the skeptic leaves an organization, a specific and irreplaceable architecture of hard-won knowledge leaves with them. How the skeptic interacts. The skeptic perceives knowledge rather than expressing it. Where the artist operates through expression, putting things out into the world, the skeptic operates through perception. They take in what's being offered and run it through their filter. Have I seen this before? Does this match what I know? Can I recognize this in terms of my existing archive? This makes their knowledge explicit, articulable. They can tell you exactly why they're skeptical. They have reasons, examples, precedents. Their knowledge has passed through the process of recognition and can therefore be put into words. This is also the skeptic's limitation. When a new idea arrives, one that genuinely doesn't fit their accumulated archive, they don't fail to perceive it. They perceive it through the only structure available to them, the architecture of what they already know. The new thing gets fitted, bent, and translated into the nearest available category. It is recognized, but as something it isn't quite. This is where misconception lives. Not in rejection, but in the gap between what was expressed and what was recognized. The idea gets in, but arrives as a distorted version of itself, shaped by the boundaries that were already there. And the skeptic, entirely reasonably, then responds to the version they received, not the version that was sent. This is why arguing with a skeptic so often feels like arguing with someone who is responding to a different conversation. They are. Their architectural knowledge hasn't blocked the signal, it has reinterpreted it. And they will defend that interpretation with full conviction, because from inside their archive, it is accurate. The loss of meaning is real, but it is invisible to everyone involved. The skeptic's world. The skeptic operates in a finite world, a concrete world. Their knowledge set is not open to all possibilities. It is closed around what has actually been encountered. This is not a flaw. It's an enormous strength in most situations. The concrete set is dense and reliable. When you're operating in territory the skeptic has traversed before, their knowledge is the most accurate map available. The problem only emerges at the edge of the map. When the territory is genuinely new, when the situation really is categorically different from anything that's come before, the skeptic's finite set has little to offer. Worse, it may actively mislead. The closest thing in the archive gets applied where it may or may not fit. The skeptic's rules. The skeptic validates knowledge through external experience. Not external in the sense of formal methodology. External in the sense of, this happened in the real world, and the real world is the ultimate test. This makes the skeptic's creative capacity deep rather than wide. They are exploitative. They go deep into what they already know rather than ranging across new territory. Their knowledge is acquired rather than innate, built up over years of accumulated experience. It produces continuous improvement rather than radical innovation. It reinforces and refines what already exists rather than disrupting it. None of these are weaknesses in isolation. Exploitative, acquired, continuous, normative knowledge is exactly what you need when you're operating in familiar territory and you need things done reliably and well. The skeptic is the guardian. The question is always, guardian of what? The skeptic's fear, in plain terms. What they know, what has actually happened in specific contexts, rich, earned, contextual. How they share it, through explicit statement. They can articulate their reasons. What world they work in, finite, concrete, the territory they've personally traversed. What counts as true, what their experience validates, the real world, not the model. Absorbs knowledge, subjectively, through their existing filter, closed to what doesn't fit. Creates knowledge, exploitatively, continuously, normatively, refinement, not revolution. The skeptic guards the door, but at some point, the knowledge needs to move beyond the door, from the person who has it to the people who need it. That's a different kind of work entirely. Chapter 3. The Politician. The knowledge that has to travel. Here is something most knowledge management frameworks miss. An idea that nobody carries dies. It doesn't matter how correct it is. It doesn't matter how rigorously it's been validated. If nobody picks it up and walks it from one room to the next, from one conversation to the next, from the person who has it to the people who need it, it disappears. Quietly. Without fanfare. The graveyard of organizations is full of correct ideas that nobody carried. The political sphere is the sphere of the carrier. What the politician knows. The politician knows the terrain between people, not the idea itself, not whether it's correct. They know how ideas travel, who needs to hear what framing will work with which audience, what timing will make a conversation land rather than spark resistance, who has to be in the room when the decision gets made, and in what order the conversations need to happen. This is knowledge that cannot be picked up from a book. It's built through years of operating inside specific organizations, specific industries, specific communities. It is, in the deepest sense, knowledge about context. Hegel called the shared context that shapes what people believe and how they act the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. The politician is the person who knows the zeitgeist from the inside. They can feel what it will and won't accept, and they know how to package knowledge so that it arrives in a form the zeitgeist can receive. The object the politician knows. Like the skeptic, the politician's knowledge is architecturally defined. Their expertise is structural. It lives in the relationships between things, not in the things themselves. The politician knows this strategy by how it connects to the last strategy, and the culture of the leadership team, and the board's current concerns, and the market narrative that's been building for 18 months. Remove any one of those contextual anchors, and the knowledge shifts. It's not portable in the modular sense. It's deeply embedded in the architecture of the specific moment. This is why politicians are so often underestimated by people from other spheres. Their knowledge looks soft, relational, contextual, intuitive about people rather than principled about things. But it's not soft. It's just structured differently. How the politician interacts. Here is the most important and most counterintuitive thing about the political sphere. Despite being embedded in a specific finite context, the politician interacts through expression, like the artist, not like the skeptic. The politician doesn't primarily receive and evaluate. They transmit. They take knowledge from wherever it originated, from the artist's intuition, from the skeptic's experience, from the analyst's validated framework. And they express it in the language of the context. They translate. And translation is an expressive act. This means the politician also operates with tacit knowledge about the translation itself. They can't always tell you why this framing will work with this person and that one won't. They know. They've developed a feel for the social architecture of their world that is just as pre-verbal as the artist's feel for their domain. The politician's world. The politician operates in a finite world, like the skeptic, but where the skeptic's finite world is built from their own archive of personal experience, the politician's is built from the social and cultural structure of the specific community they operate in. This makes their world closed in a specific way. New knowledge can only enter if it's compatible with the existing structure, or if the politician can find a way to translate it into compatibility. The politician's genius is making the foreign familiar, making the abstract concrete, making the new feel like a natural extension of the existing. The politician's rules. The politician validates internally, through resonance with the existing culture and values of the community, which is where the danger also lives. An internally validated knowledge system that only circulates within a closed context can generate tremendous confidence in things that haven't been externally tested. The consensus becomes the truth. The narrative becomes the evidence. The room believes because the room believes. Schopenhauer saw this clearly and was appalled by it. He called Hegel, the great system builder of the political sphere, a charlatan and a windbag, and not only because of personal rivalry. He genuinely believed that knowledge validated by social consensus, without external grounding, was sophisticated fiction. He wasn't wrong, and he wasn't entirely right either. The political sphere, without external grounding, does produce sophisticated fiction. With external grounding, with the analytical sphere to test what it carries, it is how knowledge changes the world. Ideas that never get carried are as useless as ideas that are wrong. The political sphere, in plain terms. What they know, how knowledge travels between people. The architecture of the social context. How they share it, through expression, translation, narrative, framing, also tacit. What world they work in, finite. The specific culture and relationships of this community. What counts as true, what resonates with the existing structure. Internal validation. Absorbs knowledge, subjectively, through the filter of what the context can receive. Creates knowledge, exploitatively, continuously. Makes the existing structure smarter. The politician moves knowledge, but moving knowledge is not the same as validating it. There is one sphere whose job is to ensure that what travels is actually true. Chapter 4. The Analyst. The knowledge that has to win. In 1641, René Descartes sat by a fire and decided to doubt everything. Not because he was nihilistic, because he was looking for something that couldn't be doubted. He needed a foundation, a single undeniable truth from which everything else could be verified or dismissed. He started with the senses. Can I trust what I see? No, the senses deceive. He moved to mathematics. Can I trust my own reasoning? No. What if something was corrupting his logic? He stripped away everything, and then he found it. In the very act of doubting, there was someone doing the doubting. Whatever else might be false, the fact of his thinking was undeniable. I think, therefore I am. Not a philosophical slogan, a foundation, an external point of certainty from which everything else could be tested. This is the spirit of the analyst. Not doubt for its own sake, the engineering of conditions under which what is true cannot be dismissed. What the analyst knows. The analyst knows what has survived a fair fight. Their approach is fundamentally adversarial, in the best sense. They don't ask, is this right? They ask, what would have to be true for this to be wrong? And can we test that? The knowledge that comes out the other side of that process is not just believed. It is, within the bounds of the methodology, undeniable. Hegel called this the dialectic. You have a position. You confront it with the best available opposition. You see what survives. The synthesis, the knowledge that emerges from the confrontation, is better than either starting point. This is not a quick process. It is not a comfortable one. But it is the only process that produces knowledge you can stake something on. The object the analyst knows. Like the artist, the analyst's knowledge is positively defined. They understand things in themselves, not just in context. This matters enormously. Because the analyst's external standard, their methodology, their framework, their rules of evidence, has to apply universally, not just in this specific situation with these specific people. If the standard bends to context, it's no longer external. It's been captured. The modular, portable quality of analytical knowledge is what makes it so powerful and so frustrating. Powerful because it applies everywhere. Frustrating because it doesn't care about your particular circumstances, your history, or your sentiment about the result. How the analyst interacts. The analyst receives knowledge, like the skeptic. But where the skeptic receives through personal experience, the analyst receives through methodology. The filter is not, does this match what I've seen? It is, does this meet the standard? A formal, explicit, shared standard that anyone with sufficient training can apply. This is explicit knowledge in its most rigorous form, documented, replicable, and not dependent on any single person's judgment. Kant called this the condition of universal validity. the idea that genuine knowledge must be recognizable as knowledge by anyone, not just by those who share your particular background and experience. The analytical sphere is where that condition is actually enforced. The analyst's world. The analyst operates in an open world, an abstract world. Like the artist, the analyst's set is not confined to what has already been actualized in a specific context. The methodology applies regardless of the finite particulars. This is what allows the analyst to receive radically new knowledge, to evaluate a claim that contradicts everything the existing community believes purely on the basis of whether it meets the standard. This is the analytical sphere's gift to the others. It can see past consensus, past social pressure, past the weight of what everyone already believes. If the evidence meets the standard, the conclusion is valid, regardless of who is inconvenienced by it. The analyst's rules. The analytical sphere validates externally. The standard exists outside the community that uses it. This is the most important feature of the sphere. Hegel's great argument, in his Philosophy of Rights, was that any community that validates its own knowledge using only its own internal standards will eventually produce groupthink. The external standard, the scientific methodology, the agreed rules of evidence, the formal framework that anyone can apply, is the safeguard against the community seeing only what it wants to see. The creative capacity of the analytical sphere is, paradoxically, as radical and disruptive as the artist's. Because it operates in an open world with an external standard, the analyst can validate knowledge that is categorically new, knowledge that the community's existing consensus would reject, but that the evidence demands. This is how self-evident truths get made. The artist sees it first. The analyst proves it last. And in between, the skeptic and the politician do the hard work of getting the idea from the first to the second. The analytical sphere, in plain terms. What they know. What has survived structured opposition, validated against an external standard. How they share it, through explicit, replicable frameworks, documented and teachable. What world they work in, open, abstract. The methodology applies regardless of context. What counts as true? What meets the external standard? Not consensus, evidence. Absorbs knowledge. Objectively, immediately, openly, any claim can be tested. Creates knowledge. Exploratively, radically, innate with the ability of disruption. 4 spheres. 4 distinct ways of knowing, sharing, inhabiting a world, and deciding what is true. None of them complete, all of them necessary. Now comes the question nobody likes to ask. Why, if all 4 are necessary, do they talk past each other so consistently? Chapter 5. Why Knowledge Gets Stuck. The Gaps Between Spheres. The 4 spheres are not enemies, but they are strangers to each other. Each one has a different relationship with the fundamental dimensions of knowledge. What counts as an object, how interaction works, what world the knowledge inhabits, and what rules validate it. When knowledge travels from one sphere to another, it's like translating between 4 different languages that use the same words for different things. The word true means something different in each sphere. The word evidence means something different. The word obvious means something different. And most of the time, nobody notices that they're using the same vocabulary to describe completely different things. The 4 sticking points. Knowledge most consistently gets stuck in 4 specific places. The first is the gap between the artist and the skeptic. The artist's knowledge is positive and modular. It knows things in themselves. The skeptic's filter is architectural and concrete. It recognizes things by their position in the existing structure. The artist says, "This is true." The skeptic says, "Show me." The artist cannot show in the way the skeptic means, because their knowledge predates any particular demonstration. The artist experiences this as non-comprehension. It is in fact comprehension followed by a negative delineation of the idea that the artist may not recognize as their own. The second is the gap between the skeptic and the politician. The skeptic's knowledge is acquired through perception, mediated, contextual, specific. The politician's expressive mode wants to carry this knowledge forward, but the skeptic's concrete, finite world resists generalization. The skeptic's knowledge is deeply embedded in the specific architectural structure of their own experience. It carries the full weight of that particularity. To travel, it must be translated again, this time out of its concrete form into something a different audience can receive. Every time the politician tries to tell the skeptic's story in a new context, something gets lost. The skeptic watches the rich specificity of their hard-won experience become generalized and abstracted into a version they no longer fully recognize. The knowledge has been translated twice, once when it arrived in the skeptic's sphere, and again when the politician carries it forward. What survives both translations may bear only a partial resemblance to the original. The third is the gap between the politician and the analyst. The politician has built consensus in a finite, internally validated world. The analyst arrives with an external standard and applies it without apology. The politician's painstakingly assembled belief gets stress-tested. Some of it fails. The politician experiences this as destruction. The analyst experiences it as exactly what's supposed to happen. The fourth is the gap between the analyst and the artist. Validated knowledge from the analyst is formal, explicit, and rigorously documented. The artist has already moved on. They're working on the next thing, in their open world of tacit knowledge and felt sense. The analyst's beautiful proof arrives after the artist has asked the next question. The knowledge never quite catches up. What actually moves knowledge? Knowledge moves between spheres when two things happen simultaneously. First, someone acts as a translator, not a person who waters down the knowledge, a person who can hold the perspective of both spheres at once, who can feel the artist's intuition and also know what the skeptic needs to see, who can honor the skeptic's experience and also understand what the analyst's standard requires. These people are rare and extremely valuable. They are often not the most senior people in the room. They are often not the most technically knowledgeable. They are the people who can move between worlds without losing what they're carrying. Second, there needs to be proximity. The spheres talk past each other most badly when they are separated. When the artist works alone, the skeptic validates alone, the politician operates alone, the analyst validates alone. When the four spheres are in close enough contact to create productive friction, in the same room, with the same shared stake in the outcome, knowledge moves. The friction is the point. It's not comfortable. However, the discomfort of being challenged by a different way of knowing is what produces knowledge that is better than any single sphere could generate. The knowledge journey. What has to happen? Artist to the skeptic. The intuition needs to be expressed in a way that creates an encounter, not an argument. Skeptic to the politician. The experience needs to be narrativized without losing its essential truth. Politician to the analyst. The consensus needs to be stress-tested against an external standard. Analyst to the artist. The validated knowledge needs to reach the people already working on the next question. This cycle is never finished. Knowledge that stops moving becomes dogma. Chapter 6. Beyond the Archetypes. Mixing the dimensions to build something better. Here is the most important thing this book has to offer. The four spheres are archetypes, not types. An archetype is a pattern, a particular combination of characteristics that tends to appear together and that has a recognizable shape. The artist, the skeptic, the politician, the analyst. These are patterns that show up in individuals, in teams, in whole organizations and cultures. They are real and recognizable, but they are not fixed. Each sphere is constituted by 4 elements: objects, interactions, sets, fields. And each element has 2 poles in their taxonomy. The spheres are specific combinations of those poles, but they are not the only possible combinations. The taxonomies can be mixed in other ways, and when they are, deliberately and intelligently, something more useful than any archetype becomes possible. What the dimensions actually are. Objects. How knowledge is shaped. The artist and the analyst know things in themselves, portably, independently of context. The skeptic and the politician know things through the structure of relationships, architecturally, contextually. Interactions. How knowledge moves. The artist and the politician express. They put knowledge into the world through tacit, pre-verbal demonstration and translation. The skeptic and the analyst receive. They take knowledge in, test it, make it explicit and articulable. Sets. What world knowledge inhabits. The artist and the analyst operate in open, infinite sets, abstract, not constrained by what already exists. The skeptic and the politician operate in closed, finite sets, concrete, embedded in the specific structure of what has actually been built. Fields. What counts as true. The artist and the politician validate internally, through resonance with a felt understanding or an existing culture. The skeptic and the analyst validate externally, through the test of real-world experience or formal methodology. What this means for organizations. Most organizations default to 1 or 2 spheres and treat the others as problems to manage. The organization dominated by the political sphere produces confident, well-communicated, internally consistent beliefs that may or may not be true. The organization dominated by the analytical sphere produces rigorous, externally validated knowledge that nobody implements. The artist-dominated organization is creative and volatile. The skeptic-dominated organization is stable and stuck. The question is not which sphere is best. The question is what knowledge configuration you need for the task at hand, and whether you can build it deliberately. Some moments call for the open, radical, exploratory character of the artist and the analyst, when you're facing genuinely new territory, when the existing maps are wrong, when you need to see something that hasn't been seen before. Some moments call for the concrete, normative, continuous character of the skeptic and the politician. When you're executing, when the territory is known, when you need deep contextual expertise applied reliably. The organization that can read which moment it's in and shift its knowledge configuration accordingly has a notable advantage. Every year, more of its knowledge survives, spreads, and gets better. Every year, the gap between what it knows and what it acts on narrows. Questions for your organization. Which sphere dominates? Is it producing the right results for where you currently are? Where does knowledge consistently stall? Which handoff between spheres is failing most often? For your most important current challenge, do you need the open, radical mode or the concrete, continuous mode? Who are the translators in your organization? The people who can carry knowledge between spheres. Are they in positions to do that work? What would a deliberately designed knowledge configuration look like for your current strategic direction? Conclusion. The pursuit. I ended the original work with a confession. Of course, only the political sphere exists. Our struggle is not against skepticism or politics. It is a struggle towards art and analysis, a pursuit of a non-existing fantasy of now and eternity. But does that make it any less real? The political sphere is the gravity of organizations. It is the default, the water we swim in. Most decisions, most days, in most places, are made inside the political sphere. Not because people are dishonest, but because the finite, internally validated, consensus-driven world is the world that facilitates organized collaboration and short-term progression. The pursuit of art and analysis is the pursuit of something that cuts against that gravity, something that reaches beyond what the existing structure already endorses, something that gets tested against a standard nobody inside the room controls. But here is what I want to leave you with, something the original work does not say clearly enough. The 4 spheres are archetypes. They are the most common, most recognizable combinations of the underlying dimensions. The artist, the skeptic, the politician, the analyst. These patterns are real. You will find them in every organization, every team, every conversation where knowledge is trying to move. They are not, however, the only patterns possible. The archetypes are useful precisely because they are legible. They help you see the knowledge landscape around you. Who is operating in which sphere? Where the gaps are? Where the sticking points live? Why that conversation keeps failing in exactly the same way? But once you can see the landscape, you can move through it differently. You can choose to activate an open set when your organization is pulling you toward a closed one. You can choose external validation when internal consensus is accumulating without check. You can choose to express, to demonstrate, to make visible, when the reflex is to explain and justify. You can choose to receive knowledge from outside your existing architecture when the architecture is telling you everything is fine. The 4 spheres are not fixed. The poles are not destined. They are levers. What this means in practice is this. You do not need to convert your organization from one sphere to another. You need to learn to read which mode of knowing the moment requires, and then to move toward it, rather than defaulting to the sphere that feels most comfortable. Some moments call for the open, radical, exploratory character of the artist and the analyst. When you are facing genuinely new territory, when the existing maps are wrong, when you need to see something that has not been seen before. Some moments call for the concrete, normative, continuous character of the skeptic and the politician. When you are executing, when the territory is known, when you need deep contextual knowledge applied reliably and well. Most moments are somewhere in between, and the organization that can read where it is and configure its knowledge accordingly is the one that keeps learning. One question that never goes away. What kind of knowing does this moment need? Pay attention to that question, and the knowledge starts moving. A note on the source. This book is an AI-assisted adaptation based on 4 spheres of knowledge creation, The Causal Principles, 2023, by René Boetker, ISBN 978-87-974-82919. All theoretical content, the 4 spheres, the framework of objects, interactions, sets, and fields, the full taxonomy of modular/architectural, tacit/explicit, abstract/concrete, internal/external validation, and the absorptive and creative capacities is Boetker's original work. It was derived through systematic engagement with the Western philosophical tradition, through a special emphasis on the philosophers Descartes, Leibniz, Kant, Schopenhauer, and Hegel. This adaptation compresses, translates, and in places simplifies a rigorous philosophical framework into a form intended for general readers. Any loss of precision in that process belongs to the adaptation. Readers who want the full argument, the causal and ontological foundations, the derivation of the spheres from first principles, the precise case for why the 4-dimensional taxonomy is necessary and complete, are directed to Boetker's original text.